my yarny friends. I'm Sara Sach, and welcome back to my crochet channel. Now, I am super excited about today's video and, of course, the videos through this week. What we're doing is a crochet along. Now, this bag pattern I wrote approximately 10 years ago. And at that time, I did just a little photo tutorial crochet along. But I wanted to update the pattern because I wanted to make myself a brand new bag because this one's getting quite worn out. But you can also see that after 10 years of use, it is still a good, big, sturdy bag. And I absolutely love it. I still use it all the time. Every time I go on a trip, I fill it with things for me and the dogs, yarn, different things. It is a huge bag. The bottom of the bag measures about 12 by 12 inches. It's about 12 inches tall, and it measures approximately 36 inches around. It is a nice, big, sturdy bag. The other thing that makes it super sturdy is you can see we use 2 strands of yarn for every single part of the bag. It's super fun and super easy, and it's a great take-along project because it's all stitched in single crochets, and that's another thing that makes it nice and tight and sturdy. And so what we're doing this week is stitching up this bag together as a crochet along. We'll do it in 3 steps. Today I'm going to tell you what materials that you need, and we're going to just stitch up the bottom of our bag. And then on Wednesday we're going to do the next portion, and then on Friday we'll finish up the bag and handles. But you're going to find it's a super easy pattern. Now, do not panic if you don't have time to do this right now. These videos will always be here on YouTube, and of course there is a written pattern with pictures, and you can find that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. All right, let's talk yarn. Now, the first one that I did that I showed you at the beginning of the video is made in red, white, and blue yarns. And that is Red Heart Super Saver that I had on hand. So I decided I wanted to make the one for today in some bright, sunshiny, fun spring colors. And so what I have here is lime green. This color here is sort of a mottled mango. And then I have a mottled purple. Now, this is acrylic yarn that I had on hand. The green and the mango are Craft Smart from Michaels that I picked up probably 3 or 4 years ago. The purple is an I Love This yarn from Hobby Lobby. And so what you're going to need is 3 colors. The reason is we're going to be doing a technique called fading. We'll begin with red, or one color, which is going to be lime green for today's video. And then we'll hold 1 strand each of the white and the red and do this section. Then we'll do 2 strands of yarn in the white, or whatever color we're choosing for our 3rd color. And then we'll be switching to our blue and white and then end up with blue. This is called fading because you're going from one color, blending, and then fading into the next color. And that's how you get such a neat look with these sections. Now, it's up to you what colors you want to choose. Your main color, or color 1, which is going to be lime green on mine, you're going to need 14 ounces of yarn, which is 2 7-ounce skeins. Then your next 2 colors, which I'm going to be using this purple and this mango, you're only going to need 7 ounces. So you're going to need a total of about 28 ounces. This is basically a skein of your mango, a skein of purple, and then 2 skeins of the green. So 14 ounces of my color 1, 7 ounces of color 2, and 7 ounces of color 3. Now, This is for the way that I'm doing it. You can get in your yarn stash and mix and match whatever colors that you want to. The main thing is to remember we're going to be stitching the entire bag holding 2 strands of yarn together. And one of the ways that I find that's easiest to do that is to roll it up into balls, or I wound these into cakes with my cake winder. That way I can move easily by pulling the center and working the 2 strands together, and I'll show you that, of course, or rolling it into balls. Now you can work from one end of the skein and the other end, the center pull and the outside pull as well, if you don't have time or just don't want to roll it up. But the entire bag is stitched up holding 2 strands of yarn together. All right, that's why it looks like I have a lot of yarn here. I wound it up into cakes so that I can stitch it up easily and not have to worry about chasing skeins all over the place. I use a container like this or a bowl to keep my cakes of yarn contained so they don't roll all over the room. All right, so bottom line, you need a total of 28 ounces of any medium weight number 4 yarn. And I know you're going to ask me, can I make this in cotton? You certainly can. You can use whatever fiber that you have on hand. The only thing that I suggest is you do not mix your fibers, because if you were to stitch part of it in cotton and part of it in acrylic, and then you go to wash it, because I've washed mine quite a bit, cotton and acrylic dry up and shrink differently, and it's going to affect the way the bag looks. So if you want to use up your cotton yarn, make sure you stitch your whole bag in cotton. If you want to use up your acrylic, make sure you stitch your whole bag in acrylic or whatever fiber that you want to use. We're going to be stitching today with our K hook. The K is a 6.50 millimeter crochet hook. And for me, it's the perfect size to meet the gauge that we need for this bag. One thing to remember, everybody stitches differently. So if your bag is coming out a little bit smaller, go up a hook size. If it's coming out a little bit too big, go down a hook size. Because especially stitching with 2 strands of yarn, if you're not used to that, it can mess with your tension. So you might want to practice a little bit before you finish the whole bag. The other things you need is a pair of scissors and a needle for weaving in those ends. So now that you know what materials that you need, you can get in your yarn stash and come up with some really cool colors. Sometimes I find colors that you wouldn't think would go together, and they do, and it comes out really pretty. So I've got my color 1. We're going to be starting with step 1 at the bottom and do the bottom portion of our bag first. So here is my 2 cakes of my lime green. You can see I'm going to be pulling from the center of both of those 2 cakes. And let's talk a little bit about stitching with 2 strands of yarn. Sometimes it can seem a little bit clumsy, but don't let that bother you. When you stitch with 2 strands of yarn, you're just going to be thinking of those 2 strands of yarn as 1 strand of yarn. You want to hold them together, and as you stitch, continue to pull this just a little bit so that they don't droop. You don't want them to come apart and droop. And that happens sometimes. You'll probably see that in this video, that I'll have to pull it again and make sure that it's laying nicely. All right, so we'll take those 2 strands of yarn, we'll make our slip knot just like we would with 1 strand. Now we're going to chain 31 chains. You want to chain this initial 31 chains just a little bit loose, because if you go too tight, one side of your bag's going to pucker up. And we want it to lay nice and pretty. So we're going to chain just a little bit loose, 31 chains. I have loosely chained my 31 chains, and that's going to roughly measure just a little bit more than 12 inches. pull that over a little more. There we go. It should measure about 12.5 inches at the end of that chain. If it's shorter than 12 inches, nice and tight, you need to loosen up a little bit. If it's more than 12.5 inches, then you need to tighten up a little bit. This is important because we want the bottom of our bag to be approximately 12 by 12 inches. And we're going to be starting in the second chain from the hook. All right, this loop is our first chain. We don't count the loop on our hook. So we'll go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through both loops. That is the basic single crochet. And we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in each of those chains across, starting in that second chain from the hook. And it's always a good idea to keep your tape measure handy. See how I'm pulling it so that it doesn't droop? Stitching my stitches as I go. 1 single crochet in each of those chains across. And again, we started in the second chain from the hook. I started in the second chain from the hook, and then I stitched 1 single crochet in each of my chains across. So I have 30 single crochets. I'm going to chain 1 and turn. For row 2, we're simply going to place a single crochet in our first stitch because our chain 1 only counts as a turning chain. It does not count as a stitch. So we'll go right in our first stitch and stitch a single crochet. And then we'll stitch 1 single crochet in each of those single crochets across. One single crochet in each single crochet all the way across. I stitched 1 single crochet in each of those 30 single crochets across. Now we're going to chain 1 and turn and repeat what we just did. Chain 1 does not count as a stitch, and so we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in each of those single crochets across. So again, we're stitching 1 single crochet in each of the single crochets all the way across our row. I completed row 3, stitching 1 single crochet in each of those 30 single crochets across, chain 1 and turn. And so now, in order to complete the bottom of our bag, we're going to repeat row 3 for 27 more rows. We've stitched 3 rows. We're going to do 27 more, stitching 1 single crochet in each of those 30 stitches, chain 1 and turn, and we'll repeat that for 27 more rows. And that will give us a total of 30 rows for the bottom of our bag. Repeat row 3 for 27 more rows. So I've stitched those additional 27 rows, so I have 30 rows. And my bag's coming out just a little over 12 inches. It's about 12 1/4 by about 12 1/4. And I'm okay with that. I don't care that it's a little bit big. It does not have to be exact. Like I said, mine's 12 1/4 by 12 1/4, which I'm really happy about that. That means it's going to be just a little bit bigger of a bag. Okay, and so this is the way that it should look. nice big square for the bottom of our bag. So the last portion we need to do for step 1 is we need to stitch an even row of single crochets down all 4 sides of our bag and place 2 single crochets in each of the 4 corners. Now we want to make sure that we have 29 single crochets on each side. That way our bag is nice and even. Now, when you're stitching down the side like this where we don't have stitches, it's very important that you go in the sides of those stitches and not the big gaping holes. All right? Like here, we have this big hole. If you place your stitch there, it's going to pull on that hole and it's not going to look pretty. All right? So, we want to stitch that stitch in the side of that hole. Now we need to have 29 single crochets. So if you place a single crochet in the end of each of our rows, you should have 29 single crochets, and then that will leave 1 stitch at the end to place your 2 single crochets for your corner. All right? So we need 29 single crochets, and we'll go down this first side, making sure we don't stitch in those big holes, like right there. We want to go in the side of that stitch. That way it's really nice and secure. Because remember, the bottom of the bag will pull when you start putting heavier things inside it. You know, like my chihuahuas. All right, so we're going to work down this first side and try to stitch 29 single crochets. I have evenly stitched 29 single crochets down the side of my bag. Now I'm going to turn and I'm at the bottom. So in this first stitch, we're going to stitch 2 single crochets, 1 and 2. And now I'm just going to place 1 single crochets in each of those stitches across. And again, the entire bag is stitched using 2 strands of yarn. That's what gives it its really good sturdiness to carry heavy things. All right, so I'm just going to place a single crochet in each of those stitches across until I reach that last stitch. All right, so we stitched 2 single crochets in the corner, and then we stitched 1 single crochet in the next 29 stitches, working across the bottom. This brings us to our next corner. We'll move that string out of the way, and we'll go in this first side of the stitch and stitch 2 single crochets, 1 and 2, and that's going to make a nice corner. And so on this side, we're going to do exactly what we did on this first side. We're going to evenly single crochet 29 stitches across. And again, remember, we want to go in the sides of those stitches, go between the best that we can, because we don't want to stitch in these big holes. We want to stitch in those stitches so that our bag holds secure. And again, we want to have 29 single crochets all the way across. Then we'll stitch 2 single crochets in that first stitch, and then stitch 1 single crochet all the way across the top of our bag. It's actually the top of our square, because this is the bottom of our bag, of course. And then we'll join back to that first single crochet where we started. So I have completed stitching single crochet all the way around the 4 sides. So you're going to need to have 29 single crochets on all 4 sides of your bag plus 2 single crochets in each of the 4 corners. All right, so when you get back across, you're going to place 2 single crochets in that last stitch, and then we're going to join with a slip stitch to that first single crochet and chain 1. And that is the completion of our big striped tote bag for step 1. And you can see how big the bottom of this bag is. All right, we're not going to cut our yarn because we're going to be starting in step 2, still using these same colors for step 2. And then I'll show you how to switch your colors and work up the side of the bag in step 2. All right, so step 1, we work the bottom of the bag. Step 2, we're going to be working the sides of the bag. And then on step 3, I'm going to show you how to add that edge with that handle. And we need a good sturdy handle on this bag because it's a good sturdy bag and it can hold lots of things. All right. Now, if you want to get a jump start and go ahead and get busy on step 2 and 3, again, that crochet pattern is there. But remember, we'll be adding more pictures and information as we go. So be sure and refresh that blog. It's down in the notes under this video. It'll say Crochet Pattern link. Just click that link. It'll take you to the blog and you can see the entire pattern. And each video that we do for this, there'll be 3 altogether. Those will be posted there as well as additional pictures. All right? So make sure you refresh that page every time you go there for the extra pictures and notes. All right, I'll see you on Wednesday for step 2.